What if I told you that there is a single moment, invisible to most, that changes the entire trajectory of your life? Not because something external shifts, but because something inside you stops resisting the truth. It is not a dramatic event. There is no thunder, no revelation written in the sky. It is quieter than that. It happens in the space between breaths, in the pause before you speak, in the moment when you realize you no longer feel the need to justify who you are to anyone, including yourself. And in that moment, without announcement or ceremony, your reality begins to reorganize itself around a new center of gravity. This is not metaphor. This is not poetic exaggeration. This is the lived experience of thousands who have walked through the doorway of their own silence and found, on the other side, a world that finally reflects back something true. Most people spend their entire lives explaining their choices, their emotions, their failures, their successes, their silence, their noise. They explain to parents who never asked the right questions. They explain to partners who stopped listening years ago. They explain to colleagues who judge from a distance, to strangers on the internet who will forget them in seconds, to a voice inside their own head that sounds like everyone they ever try to please. And the explaining never ends, because it is not really about being understood. It is about avoiding rejection. It is about staying safe inside a story that others can accept, even if that story has nothing to do with who you actually are. But there comes a day, often without warning, when you simply stop. Not because you have found the perfect words, not because you have finally proven your worth, but because you realize, in a way that moves through your body like a slow wave, that no explanation will ever be enough for someone who has already decided not to see you. And more importantly, that you no longer need their sight to know you exist. This stopping is not silence born of defeat. It is not the quiet of someone who has given up. It is the silence of someone who has finally stopped performing. And the moment that performance ends, something ancient and intelligent inside you begins to wake up. It is as though you have been living in a house with all the furniture pushed against the walls, and now, for the first time, you are allowed to rearrange. The space feels different. The light comes in at new angles. You notice doorways you never saw before, and you realize that the architecture of your life was never fixed. It was only held in place by the constant effort of explanation, by the need to make sense to people who were never meant to understand you in the first place. Nothing about this process is coincidence. You may feel that you stumbled into this realization by accident, that it happened because you were tired or hurt or simply ran out of words. But that is not the whole truth. The truth is that your psyche has been preparing you for this moment for years. Every time you swallowed your truth to keep the peace. Every time you edited yourself to fit into a room that was too small. Every time you felt the gap between who you are and who you were pretending to be. All of it was accumulating, building pressure, waiting for the day when you would finally be ready to stop. And when that day comes, it is not because you have become strong enough to fight. It is because you have become tired enough to surrender. And in that surrender, the reorganization begins. Carl Jung spent much of his life studying the patterns that emerge when a person stops living from the surface and begins to descend into the deeper layers of the self. He called this process individuation. But individuation is not a goal you achieve. It is not a certificate you earn or a state you arrive at and then maintain. It is a continual peeling away of what is false, a slow and sometimes painful recognition of the difference between the persona you wear and the self you actually are. And one of the most profound moments in this process, one that Jung observed again and again in the people he worked with, is the moment when they stop explaining themselves to the outer world and begin, instead, to listen to the inner one. Because the outer world, no matter how loud, is not where your truth lives. It lives in the quiet. It lives in the body. It lives in the dreams you have forgotten, in the symbols that repeat themselves in your life, in the synchronicities that you used to call coincidence, but now recognize as the language of the unconscious trying to get your attention. Jung understood that the unconscious does not speak in logic. It speaks in images, in feelings, in sudden knowing. And when you stop explaining yourself, you create space for that language to come through. You stop translating everything into terms that others can understand, and you start noticing what is actually true. You start noticing that the relationships that required constant explanation were never aligned with who you are. You start noticing that the career you defended to your family was built on someone else's definition of success. You start noticing that the version of yourself you kept explaining was a character you were playing, not a person you were being. And once you notice, you cannot unnotice. The reorganization has already begun. In this exploration, I want to share with you several signs, several inner shifts that indicate this process is happening inside you. These are not things you do. They are things you notice. They are not achievements. They are recognitions. And if you have been feeling strange lately, if you have been feeling distant from people you used to be close to, if you have been feeling a pull toward silence, toward solitude, toward a life that makes no sense to anyone but you, then it is possible that your reality is already reorganizing. It is possible that you are not falling apart. You are falling into place. And what I will describe here may help you see that what you thought was isolation is actually initiation. What you thought was loss is actually release. What you thought was confusion is actually clarity beginning to form in the depths, waiting to rise. The first sign is this: you stop defending your choices, not because you have become indifferent, but because you have become certain. There is a difference between the two, and it is everything. Indifference is cold. It is the result of numbing, of shutting down, of deciding that nothing matters because caring hurts too much. But certainty is warm. It is alive. It is the result of listening so deeply to yourself that you no longer need external validation to know what is right. And when you reach that place, the need to defend falls away naturally, not because you are avoiding conflict, but because you're no longer in conflict with yourself. You know why you made the choice you made. You know in your bones. And that knowing is enough. Think about the last time someone questioned a decision you made. Maybe it was a family member asking why you turned down a job opportunity. Maybe it was a friend asking why you ended a relationship that looked fine from the outside. Maybe it was someone online, someone you do not even know, making assumptions about your life based on a single post. And think about how you responded. Did you feel the need to explain? Did you feel the tightness in your chest? The urgency to make them understand, to prove that you are not wrong, not foolish, not lost? That urgency is not about them. It is about you. It is about the part of you that still believes your worth is contingent on their approval. And as long as that belief is active, you will keep explaining. You will keep trying to translate your inner knowing into language that satisfies their doubt. But their doubt is not your responsibility, and their understanding is not required for your truth to be true. When you stop defending, something shifts in the way people relate to you. Some of them become uncomfortable. They push harder. They ask more questions, not because they care about the answers, but because your silence disrupts the dynamic they were used to. They were used to you explaining. They were used to you seeking their approval, even subtly. And now that you're not doing that, they do not know what to do with you. They may call you distant. They may say you have changed. And they are right. You have, but not in the way they think. You have not become less. You have become more aligned, more honest, more whole. And that wholeness does not need to defend itself, because it is not trying to convince anyone of anything. It simply is. Other people, the ones who are aligned with who you actually are, will respond differently. They will relax. They will feel safer around you. Because when you stop defending yourself, you stop demanding that they do the same. You stop projecting your need for validation onto them. You stop requiring them to agree with you in order for you to feel secure. And in that space, real intimacy becomes possible. Not the intimacy of agreement, but the intimacy of presence. The intimacy of two people who are allowed to be exactly who they are, without performance, without explanation, without the exhausting labor of constantly proving their worth. But this shift does not happen overnight. It happens in layers. At first, you may still feel the pull to explain. You may still feel the old habit rising up, the urge to justify, to clarify, to make sure no one misunderstands. And that is okay. You do not have to be perfect at this. You do not have to suddenly become a silent sage who never speaks. The point is not to stop communicating. The point is to stop over-explaining, to stop giving more of yourself than is being asked for, to stop trying to control how others perceive you, because that control is an illusion. People will perceive you however they need to, based on their own wounds, their own projections, their own level of consciousness. And no amount of explaining will change that. What will change is how much energy you waste trying. The second sign is that you begin to notice a strange kind of peace in being misunderstood. This may sound contradictory. Most of us have been taught that being misunderstood is one of the worst feelings in the world. We have been taught to fear it, to avoid it, to do everything we can to make sure people see us clearly. But what if being misunderstood is not a failure? What if it is, in fact, a kind of freedom? Because when you're no longer afraid of being misunderstood, you're no longer controlled by the opinions of others. You are no longer editing yourself to fit their expectations. You are no longer performing a version of yourself that is palatable, acceptable, easy to categorize. You're simply being, and some people will get it, and some will not, and both are fine. This peace does not come from arrogance. It does not come from thinking you are better than others or that their perspectives do not matter. It comes from recognizing that you are not responsible for how others interpret you. You are responsible for being honest. You are responsible for living in alignment with your values. You are responsible for showing up as fully as you can. But you are not responsible for making sure everyone understands. Because understanding is not something you can force. It is something that happens when two people are on the same frequency. And if they are not, no amount of words will bridge that gap. You can explain yourself 1,000 times, and they will still hear something different. Because they are not really listening to you. They are listening to their own story about you. And that story was written long before you open your mouth. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to correct every misunderstanding. You see someone describe you in a way that feels completely wrong, and you feel this immediate need to set the record straight. To say, no, that is not who I am. That is not what I meant. You are not seeing me clearly. And maybe you do say it. Maybe you write the long message, the careful explanation, the detailed defense, and maybe they still do not get it. Or maybe they do, for a moment, but then a week later they are back to the same misunderstanding because the issue was never about information. It was about perception. It was about the lens they are looking through. And you cannot change someone's lens by explaining yourself more clearly. They have to be willing to see differently. And if they are not, that is not your failure. That is just the reality of human limitation. When you stop trying to correct every misunderstanding, you reclaim an enormous amount of energy. Energy that was being spent on damage control, on reputation management, on trying to make sure your image in someone else's mind matches the truth of who you are. And that energy, once reclaimed, can be redirected toward your actual life, toward your creativity, toward your growth, toward the people who do see you, who do not need convincing, who recognize you without explanation because they are operating from the same depth. Those are your people, not the ones you have to constantly explain yourself to, not the ones who require proof, but the ones who just know. And when you stop wasting energy on the others, you create space for more of those people to enter your life. Because like attracts like, and when you are living from your truth, you magnetize others who are doing the same. But there is a grief that comes with this shift, a grief that is rarely talked about. Because when you stop trying to be understood by people who will never understand you, you also have to let go of the hope that they will. You have to let go of the fantasy that one day, if you just find the right words, they will finally see you. And that fantasy, even though it caused you pain, was also a kind of comfort. It kept you connected, even if that connection was dysfunctional. It gave you something to work toward, even if that work was futile. And now, without that fantasy, you are left with the truth. The truth that some people will never see you. The truth that some relationships were never meant to go deep. The truth that you have been trying to force something that was never aligned in the first place. And that truth hurts, but it also liberates. Because once you stop trying to force it, you stop suffering. You stop waiting. You stop hoping for something that is not coming. And you start living in the reality of what is, rather than the illusion of what you wished it could be. The third sign is that your relationships begin to reorganize themselves without you doing anything. This is one of the most mysterious aspects of this process. You do not sit down and decide to end certain friendships. You do not make a list of people to cut off. You do not announce that you're changing your social circle. You just stop explaining yourself, and suddenly, the people who were only there because you were performing start to fade. They stop calling. They stop reaching out. And at first, you may feel hurt. You may wonder if you did something wrong. But if you sit with it long enough, you realize that nothing is wrong. What is happening is that the relationship was built on a false foundation. It was built on the version of you that needed their approval. And now that version is gone. And without it, there is nothing holding the relationship together. It was never about you as a person. It was about you as a role. And now that you're no longer playing that role, the relationship has no reason to continue. This can be disorienting. You may look around and realize that your life looks very different than it did a year ago. People you thought would be with you forever are gone. Invitations you used to receive have stopped coming. Group chats you were once active in have gone quiet. And you may feel a sense of loss, a sense of loneliness, a sense of wondering if you made a mistake by stopping the performance. But if you stay with that feeling, if you do not rush to fill the space with new distractions, you will begin to notice something else. You will notice that the space feels clean. It feels honest. It feels like you can finally breathe. Because those relationships, even though they were familiar, were also suffocating. They required you to be smaller than you are. They required you to hide parts of yourself. They required you to constantly manage how you were being perceived. And now that they are gone, you are free. Free to be all of who you are, without editing, without filtering, without fear. And in that freedom, new relationships begin to emerge. Not because you went looking for them, not because you joined a new group or put yourself out there in some forced way, but because you are finally vibrating at your true frequency. And people who are on that same frequency can feel it. They are drawn to you, not because of what you do or what you offer, but because of who you are. And these relationships feel different. They do not require effort. They do not require explanation. There's an ease, a flow, a sense of being seen without having to try. You can be silent, and it is not awkward. You can share something vulnerable, and it is not used against you. You can show up exactly as you are, and it is enough. More than enough. It is exactly what was needed. But this reorganization is not always immediate. There is often a period of solitude in between. A period where the old has fallen away, but the new has not yet arrived. And this period can feel like a desert. It can feel like you are alone, like you made a mistake, like maybe you should go back and try to fix things, try to explain yourself better, try to make the old relationships work. But this is a test. Not a test from some external force, but a test from your own psyche. A test to see if you are really ready to live from your truth, or if you will retreat back into the safety of performance the moment things get uncomfortable. And if you can stay in that desert, if you can sit with the loneliness without running, without filling the space with distractions, without going back to the people who never really saw you, then you will emerge on the other side transformed. You will emerge with a kind of inner stability that cannot be shaken by external approval or disapproval. You will emerge knowing that you are enough, all by yourself, and that any relationship you enter from that place will be a bonus, not a necessity. Jung spoke often about the process of withdrawal and return. The idea that in order to individuate, in order to become who you truly are, you must first withdraw from the collective. You must step away from the roles, the expectations, the identities that were handed to you. You must spend time alone, in the dark, in the unknown, facing the parts of yourself that you have been avoiding. And only after that descent, only after that encounter with your own shadow, can you return to the world as a whole person. But the person who returns is not the same person who left. They are quieter. They are more grounded. They do not need to prove anything. They do not need to explain anything. They simply are. And that presence, that groundedness, is magnetic. It draws in the people and opportunities that are aligned with the truth of who they are. And it repels everything else. And that repelling is not a loss. It is a clearing. It is the psyche making space for what is real. The fourth sign is that you become less interested in convincing and more interested in creating. This is a subtle but profound shift. When you are still in the mode of explaining yourself, much of your energy goes into defending your perspective, proving your worth, making sure people understand why you think the way you think or do the things you do. But when you stop explaining, that energy is freed up, and it naturally begins to flow toward creation, toward making things, toward expressing what is inside you, not because you need others to validate it, but because it needs to come out, because it is part of who you are. And whether anyone sees it or understands it becomes secondary. What matters is that you're honoring the creative impulse, the inner voice, the pull towards something that only you can bring into the world. This shift often begins with small things. Maybe you start writing again. not for an audience, but just for yourself. Maybe you start drawing, or cooking, or rearranging your space in a way that feels more like you. Maybe you start a project that makes no logical sense, that has no clear outcome, but that feels right in your body. And you do it without announcing it, without posting about it, without needing feedback or validation. You do it because it is yours. And in that privacy, in that sacred space between you and the work, something begins to grow. Something that is not dependent on external approval. Something that is rooted in your own truth, your own vision, your own unique way of seeing the world. There is a particular kind of freedom that comes from creating without the need to explain. Because when you are not trying to convince anyone, you are not limited by their understanding. You are not editing yourself to fit their expectations. You are not second-guessing every choice because you are worried about how it will be received. You are simply following the thread of what feels true, what feels alive, what feels like it wants to emerge. And sometimes the thread leads you to places that make no sense to anyone else. Sometimes it leads you to create things that are strange, that are unconventional, that do not fit into any category. But those are often the things that are most authentically yours. Those are the things that carry your essence, your fingerprint, your soul. And here is what happens when you create from that place. The right people find it, not the masses, not the algorithm, but the people who need to see it, who are ready to receive it, who recognize something in it because it reflects something in them. And those people do not need you to explain it. They just get it. They feel it. And that recognition, that resonance, is worth more than 1,000 shallow likes or polite compliments. Because it is real. It is a meeting of souls. It is proof that you are not alone, that your truth matters, that what you have to offer is needed in the world, even if only by a few. But this shift also requires you to let go of the need for your creativity to be understood by everyone, to let go of the need for it to be successful in the conventional sense, to let go of the idea that your worth as a creator is determined by how many people see your work, or how much money it makes, or how much praise it receives. Because if you tie your creativity to those external measures, you will always be explaining. You will always be trying to make it more palatable, more marketable, more acceptable. And in that process, you will lose the very thing that made it worth creating in the first place. You will lose the truth, the rawness, the you-ness of it. And what you will be left with is something that looks successful on the outside, but feels empty on the inside. And that emptiness will eventually hollow you out, because you will know, deep down, that you betrayed yourself for approval. And no amount of approval can fill that void. So the invitation here is to create for the sake of creating. To let your work be an offering, not a plea. To let it be an expression, not an explanation. To trust that the people who are meant to find it will find it, and the people who are not will pass by. And both are perfect, because your job is not to reach everyone. Your job is to be honest, to be true, to bring forth what is inside you, regardless of whether it is understood. And in that act, in that commitment to your own truth, you become a beacon for others who are trying to do the same. You give them permission, just by existing, just by creating without apology, to do the same. And that is how culture shifts. Not through convincing, not through arguing, but through embodiment. Through people who are brave enough to stop explaining and start creating. Through people who trust their inner voice more than the outer noise. Through people like you. The fifth sign is that you begin to trust your body more than your thoughts. This may seem unrelated to the act of stopping explanation, but it is deeply connected, because most explanation happens in the mind. It is the mind that feels the need to justify, to rationalize, to make sense of things in a way that others can accept. But the body does not explain. The body simply knows. It knows when something is right or wrong, safe or unsafe, aligned or misaligned. And when you stop explaining yourself to others, you also begin to stop over-explaining things to yourself. You begin to trust the felt sense, the gut knowing, the intuition that speaks in sensations rather than words. Think about the last time you tried to talk yourself into something that did not feel right. Maybe it was a relationship that looked good on paper, but fell off in your body. Maybe it was a job opportunity that made logical sense, but left you feeling heavy. Maybe it was a social event that you thought you should attend, even though every cell in your body was saying no. And think about how much energy you spend trying to explain to yourself why you should do it. Listing the reasons. weighing the pros and cons, asking for advice from people who did not have to live with the consequences. All of that mental activity was an attempt to override what your body already knew. And the more you explained, the more confused you became. Because the mind can always find a reason. It can always build a case. But the body does not lie. And when you finally stop explaining and start listening, the answer is always clear. This trust in the body is not about rejecting the mind. It is about recognizing that the mind is a tool, not a master. It is useful for planning, for analyzing, for solving problems. But it is not the seed of wisdom. Wisdom lives deeper. It lives in the body, in the heart, in the quiet knowing that does not need words. And when you stop explaining yourself to the world, you create space to hear that knowing. You create space to feel it. You create space to act on it, even when it does not make logical sense, even when you cannot articulate why, even when others question your decision. Because you know, and that knowing is enough. This shift often begins with small experiments. Maybe you start noticing how your body feels in certain environments. Maybe you start paying attention to the subtle contraction that happens when you are around certain people, or the expansion that happens when you are alone in nature. Maybe you start honoring the impulse to rest, even when your mind says you should be productive. Maybe you start saying no to things that feel like obligations, even if you cannot explain why. And at first, this may feel selfish. It may feel irresponsible. It may feel like you are letting people down. But if you stay with it, if you keep choosing the body's wisdom over the mind's explanations, you will begin to notice that your life starts to feel more aligned, more easeful, more true. And here is the paradox. When you stop explaining yourself and start trusting your body, you actually become more reliable. Not in the sense of always saying yes, but in the sense of only saying yes when you mean it. You become someone whose word matters because you are not overcommitting out of guilt or obligation. You are not saying yes to keep the peace and then resenting it later. You are saying yes when it is a true yes and no when it is a true no. And people may not always like your no, but they will learn to trust it. They will learn that when you say yes, you are all in. And that kind of integrity, that kind of alignment is rare. And it is magnetic. But this also means you have to be willing to disappoint people. You have to be willing to let them be upset with you. You have to be willing to be misunderstood, to be called selfish, to be accused of changing. Because you're changing, you are moving from a life of performance to a life of presence. And not everyone will understand that. Not everyone will celebrate it. Some people will feel threatened by it, because your refusal to explain yourself challenges their need for control. It challenges their belief that they have a right to understand everything about you. It challenges the unspoken contract that you will always be available, always accommodating, always willing to justify your choices. And when you break that contract, there will be consequences. But those consequences are not punishments. They are clarifications. They are the psyche's way of showing you who is aligned with your truth and who is not. And that information is invaluable. The sixth sign is that you begin to experience synchronicities more frequently. This is where the reorganization of reality becomes undeniable. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop trying to control how others perceive you, when you start living from your truth rather than your performance, you create space for the unconscious to communicate with you. And the unconscious does not communicate through logic. It communicates through symbols, through dreams, through meaningful coincidences that seem too perfect to be random. Jung called this synchronicity, the coming together of inner and outer events in a way that is meaningful, even if there is no causal connection. You may start noticing that the book you need falls off the shelf at the exact moment you are thinking about a particular question. You may start noticing that the person you were just thinking about texts you out of nowhere. You may start noticing that the same symbol, the same number, the same phrase keeps appearing in your life over and over until you finally pay attention. And at first, you may dismiss these things as coincidence. But the more you stop explaining and start noticing, the more you realize that these are not coincidences. They are messages. They are the psyche's way of confirming that you are on the right path, that you are aligned, that the inner work you are doing is having an effect on the outer world. This is not magic. This is not wishful thinking. This is the natural result of living in alignment with your deeper self. Because when you are not fragmented, when you're not split between who you are and who you are pretending to be, you become a coherent signal. And that coherence attracts coherence. It attracts the people, the opportunities, the experiences that match your frequency. And it repels everything else. And that repelling, that falling away of what is not aligned, is just as important as the attracting, because it clears the space. It makes room for what is real. It allows the reorganization to happen without interference. But synchronicity is not something you can force. It is not something you can manipulate or control. It is something you notice. It is something you allow. And the more you stop trying to make things happen, the more things start to happen on their own. The more you stop explaining yourself and start trusting the process, the more the process reveals itself to be intelligent, purposeful, and deeply supportive. You begin to feel held by something larger than yourself, not in a religious sense, necessarily, but in a psychological and spiritual sense. You begin to feel that you are not alone, that you are not making this up, that there's a pattern unfolding, and you are part of it. And that feeling, that sense of being woven into something meaningful, is one of the most profound experiences a human being can have. The seventh sign is that you become comfortable with silence. Not just external silence, but internal silence. The kind of silence that happens when you are not constantly narrating your life, not constantly analyzing, not constantly trying to figure everything out. This silence is not empty. It is full. It is alive. It is the space where insight arises, where creativity emerges, where the deeper self can finally be heard. And when you stop explaining yourself to others, you also stop over-explaining things to yourself. You stop needing to have an answer for everything. You stop needing to understand every feeling, every impulse, every shift. You learn to sit with the not knowing. And in that sitting, in that willingness to be with what is, without rushing to conclusions, you begin to access a kind of wisdom that is not intellectual. It is embodied. It is felt. It is known. This comfort with silence often makes other people uncomfortable. We live in a culture that values constant communication, constant updates, constant engagement. And when you stop participating in that, when you stop filling every moment with words, people may interpret your silence as distance, as coldness, as rejection. But that is their projection. Your silence is not about them. It is about you. It is about creating space for your own inner life. It is about honoring the fact that not everything needs to be shared, not everything needs to be explained, not everything needs to be turned into content or conversation. Some things are meant to be held in silence. Some things are meant to be lived, not described. And when you give yourself permission to keep those things private, to keep them sacred, you protect your energy. You protect your truth. You protect the delicate process of becoming who you are. And in that silence, you begin to hear things you could not hear before. You begin to hear the voice of your intuition, which is quiet and steady, not loud and demanding. You begin to hear the voice of your body, which speaks in sensations and impulses, not in words. You begin to hear the voice of your soul, which has been trying to get your attention for years, but was drowned out by all the noise, all the explaining, all the performing. And when you finally hear that voice, when you finally give it space to speak, everything changes. Because that voice knows. It knows what you need. It knows where you're meant to go. It knows who you are, beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation. And when you start following that voice, your life begins to reorganize around it. Not because you're forcing it, but because you are finally allowing it. The eighth sign, and perhaps the most subtle, is that you begin to feel a sense of inner authority. Not the kind of authority that needs to dominate or control others, but the kind that simply knows its own truth and does not waver. This authority is not loud. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to prove itself. It simply is. And when you embody this authority, people feel it. They may not be able to name it, but they sense that something has shifted in you. They sense that you're no longer looking to them for permission, for validation, for approval. They sense that you have found something inside yourself that is more stable, more reliable, more true than anything they could offer you. And that can be threatening to people who are used to having power over you. But it is liberating to people who are ready to find their own authority. This inner authority is not something you develop by reading books or taking courses. though those things can support the process. It is something you discover by living, by making choices that align with your truth, even when they are hard, by honoring your boundaries, even when it disappoints others, by trusting your intuition, even when it does not make sense, by sitting with discomfort instead of running from it, by facing your shadow instead of projecting it onto others. And slowly, through all of that lived experience, you begin to trust yourself. You begin to know that you can handle whatever comes. You begin to know that you do not need someone else to tell you what is right. You begin to know that the answers you are looking for are not out there. They are in here. And that knowing, that deep, embodied knowing, is the foundation of inner authority. And when you have that foundation, the need to explain yourself dissolves completely, because you are no longer seeking external validation. You are no longer trying to convince anyone of your worth. You are no longer performing for approval. You are simply living. And that living, that authentic, grounded, aligned living, is its own explanation. People who are meant to understand will understand. People who are not will not. And both are fine, because your worth is not contingent on their understanding. Your worth is inherent. It is not something you earn. It is not something you prove. It is something you are. And when you finally know that, really know it, not just intellectually, but in your bones, your reality reorganizes around that knowing. Opportunities that match your worth begin to appear. Relationships that honor your worth begin to form. And everything that was built on the false belief that you needed to earn your place begins to fall away. Now, as we come toward the end of this exploration, I want to return to where we began. The idea that nothing is random. The idea that the moment you stop explaining yourself, your reality begins to reorganize. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetic language. This is lived experience. And if you have been feeling the pull towards silence, towards solitude, toward a life that makes no sense to anyone but you, then it is possible that this process is already happening inside you. It is possible that the discomfort you have been feeling is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is shifting. It is a sign that your psyche is preparing you for a new way of being. A way of being that is not based on performance, but on presence. Not based on approval, but on alignment. Not based on explanation, but on embodiment. And this process, this reorganization, is not something you can rush. It has its own timing. It unfolds in layers. And each layer requires you to let go of something. To let go of the need to be understood. To let go of the need to be liked. To let go of the need to have everything figured out. To let go of the relationships that were built on false foundations. To let go of the identities that were handed to you. To let go of the belief that your worth is something you have to earn. And each letting go creates space. Space for something new to emerge. Space for your true self to come forward. Space for your reality to reorganize around what is real rather than what is performed. So if you're in that space right now, if you're in the discomfort of not knowing, of not being understood, of feeling like everything is falling apart, I want to offer you this. You are not falling apart. You are falling into place. The pieces that are leaving were never meant to stay. The people who are fading were never aligned with your truth. The identities that are dissolving were never who you really are. And what is emerging, even though you cannot see it yet, is more true, more aligned, more you than anything you have known before. But you have to trust the process. You have to trust the silence. You have to trust that the reorganization is happening, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because the deepest changes are always invisible at first. They happen in the dark. They happen in the quiet. They happen in the space between who you were and who you are becoming. And one of the most supportive things you can do during this time is simply to notice, to pay attention, to write down the synchronicities, to write down the moments when you felt aligned, even if they were brief, to write down the things that no longer feel true and the things that are beginning to feel true, not to analyze them, not to figure them out, but just to witness them, to honor them, to give them space to exist without needing to explain them. Because the act of noticing is itself a form of validation. It says to your psyche, I see you. I am paying attention. I trust that what is happening is meaningful, even if I do not understand it yet. And that trust, that willingness to be with the process without needing to control it, is what allows the reorganization to complete itself. Another practice that can support this process is simply sitting in silence, not meditating, necessarily, though that can be helpful, but just sitting, just being, without your phone, without distraction, without the need to fill the space with noise. And at first, this may feel uncomfortable. Your mind may race. Your body may feel restless. You may feel the urge to get up, to do something, to check something, to avoid the discomfort of just being. But if you can stay with it, even for a few minutes, you will begin to notice that the discomfort softens. You will begin to notice that beneath the restlessness, there is a stillness. And beneath the noise, there is a silence. And in that silence, there is a presence that is always there, always steady, always true. And the more you connect with that presence, the less you need to explain yourself, because that presence is who you are, beneath all the layers. And it does not need validation. It does not need approval. It simply is. And finally, I want to invite you to consider this. If you have made it this far, if you have stayed with this exploration, then something in you is ready. Ready to stop explaining, ready to stop performing, ready to stop living for the approval of others and start living for the truth of yourself. And that readiness is not something you created. It is something that has been growing inside you for a long time. And now, it is ready to emerge. So let it. Let yourself stop. Let yourself be silent. Let yourself be misunderstood. Let yourself reorganize. Because on the other side of that reorganization is a life that is more true, more aligned, more alive than anything you have known before. And that life is not something you have to chase. It is something you allow. It is something you become. And it begins the moment you stop explaining yourself and start trusting that who you are, exactly as you are, is enough. If this resonated with you, I invite you to like this video, to subscribe if you have not already, and to share your own experience in the comments. Not to explain yourself, but simply to witness, to acknowledge, to say, yes, I am in this process too. Because when we share our truth, not to convince, but to connect, we remind each other that we are not alone, that this reorganization is happening in many of us at once, and that together, in our silence, in our refusal to perform, in our commitment to truth, we are creating a new way of being, a way that honors depth over speed, presence over performance, and truth over approval. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for trusting yourself enough to stop explaining and start living.